Hi folks, and welcome back to Quarantine According to Eddie. It is the Thursday the 28th of May. It's about 10 to 2, and I'm currently trying to repair my hedge trimmer. Now you're probably thinking, for a philosopher, this guy spends a lot of time trying to repair stuff, and you'd be right. But it brings me a lot of joy. I enjoy repairing things, and I enjoy repairing things for other people as well. That provides me with a great deal of joy. This isn't the first hedge trimmer I've worked on. I've repaired my dad's, I've repaired my other friends, domestic appliances like irons. I've done building work as well, done some bricklaying, and of course there's motorcycles as well. In fact, when all this is over, I am hoping to help out a couple of friends who have a motorcycle that isn't working at the moment. They're a really nice couple, friends with them both in their own right, and it would be really nice to help them out, get them running again. So my dearly beloved and I were having a bit of a chat about the whole Cummings thing, and the question came up, which I thought was a very valid question. Did the journalists do the right thing? In terms of, was it moral for them to expose Cummings in the way that they did? Now, this may seem like a strange question, but you've got to think about the fact that in all of this, a lot of people have now been breaching lockdown rules because they've been so annoyed with how this guy was behaving that they have in fact started going out and about, and this goes against the whole idea of lockdown puts people at risk. So, because the journalists exposed Dominic Cummings and led to this kind of action, are they guilty of any harm that comes to people as a result? Very interesting question. And for this, we probably need to have a think about intention of the journalists, the consequences that it creates, and whether they were overall justified. So let's think about the intentions first. And if you go for a sort of a deontological approach to ethics, so like Kantian ethics or something, then you go by a deontological approach of it's all about the intentions, it's all about the act in and of itself. So, if you commit an act, then it's either right or wrong in itself, and it depends on whether you intended to commit that act or not. And so this is quite the Kantian approach, and you could say that a journalist's primary objective is to tell the truth and to report the truth. So if that was the case, then their intentions would be good. They were trying to expose the truth. You need to ask as well, is it something that the public have a legitimate interest in? Not, do they find it entertaining, but is it something they need to know? And you probably could argue that this is something that the public needs to know, that someone in top-level government is breaking the rules. So for a Kantian, it wouldn't matter about the consequences, because it's important that the journalists tell the truth. Although, of course, there is the question of, well, what was their intent? Was their intent really good, or were they trying to get back at Dominic Cummings? Cummings and the media famously have a very bad relationship, and it's difficult to tell what intention is. So, tricky one on that one. But if they were acting in the public good, and if that was their intention, then you could argue that they did the right thing. Now, the flip side to this would be a more teleological approach, one that believes that it's about the consequences, something more like utilitarianism. There are others, of course, but utilitarianism is a classic teleological one. And you might then say, well, the consequences have been that lives may be lost. So that in itself is not acceptable. And therefore, it was immoral of the papers, of the media, to expose Cummings because of the consequences it would create. Of course, then you have to then ask, well, what about the alternative consequences if they covered it up? The government essentially just carried on doing what it liked because it thought that it was above the law. That could lead to all kinds of consequences as well, but it doesn't change the fact that you could argue from a consequentialist point of view, from a teleological point of view, the journalists that exposed Dominic Cummings, which led to people going off and breaking lockdown, and then if they get coronavirus and die, those deaths sit squarely on the shoulders of those in the media who exposed it. But what about if we went for sort of an alternative approach to this? What if we asked ourselves, okay, well, the journalists had a duty to tell the truth, but they knew that there might be harm done. So, were they still right or were they wrong to do it anyway? Well, for this we need to perhaps think, okay, were they intending to do any harm? Well, no, they wouldn't have been intending to do harm. They would have been intending to get the story out there. Okay, so that's one thing. Is the amount of good that they create more than the amount of harm that they create? Difficult to say, admittedly, at this point, but it could well, expose the corruption in the government, which is very important, even if lives are lost. Is the act of exposing this guy, is it inherently immoral? Well, it's not. No, it is in itself a good thing to do, to expose corruption. And if they had not acted, could there be proportionally serious consequences? Well, it's possible. If the government essentially felt it could do anything, then and doesn't feel it's accountable to its people, that is a very bad thing. So, all in, it does feel like actually there's a lot to be said for taking the course of action that they did, even though it would cause some bad consequences. So a mixture of intention and consequences. And for those of you who are perhaps astute enough, will have noticed that actually what I was doing there is describing Thomas Aquinas' double effect. Never seem to be able to get away from Thomas Aquinas. And it does seem that if you take that approach of both intent and consequences, the journalists were doing the right thing. And so that would be like another approach to it. Perhaps a final thing to consider in all of this is that maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. The journalists exposed corruption at the top level, but what actually caused people to think, well, I can just go out and do what I like? It was the fact that the PM rallied behind Dominic Cummings rather than firing him. So this, I suppose, adds another level into it. The journalists did what they did. They did what they were supposed to do. They did something with the correct intentions. It was then over to the PM to decide how he was going to act. And as it was, he decided that he was going to double down and protect the guy. So, in the end, who's the one being immoral? It's not the journalist's fault that the PM made a potentially immoral decision to decide to keep Cummings on. But hey, that in itself is a different question. So, it's something to think about anyway. As ever, I'd love your comments and any questions, so please do get in touch. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you next time.